I never imagined that doing the right thing, literally saving someone's life, would become the reason I'd be called into HR and accused of crossing a line I never intended to approach. I'm not the kind of person who thrives on conflict. If anything, I'm the opposite. I'm the quiet guy at work, the one who listens more than he speaks, who tries to be helpful without overstepping, who would rather take on extra tasks himself than make a scene. I'm the one who always remembers to refill the coffee pot and hold the elevator, even when no one thanks me. I'm not telling you this to make myself sound like some saint. I'm telling you because I need you to understand that I never wanted any attention. I never wanted drama. I certainly never wanted to be the subject of a complaint so serious it nearly cost me my job. But here I am, writing this out because months later, I still can't fully process how something so simple, a reflexive act of trying to help someone, turned into an incident that left me doubting my instincts, my workplace relationships, and my own sense of decency. Some days, I wonder if I should have just sat there, hands folded in my lap, waiting for someone else to react. Maybe then, none of this would have happened. Maybe I wouldn't have to carry this lingering unease, this low, constant fear that no matter what I do, it will be misread. The thing is, I know it sounds petty. On paper, everything is resolved. She and I are civil now. I wasn't fired. The official record says I did nothing wrong. But when I think about the look on her face when she filed that complaint, about how quickly I went from being a friend to being a threat in her eyes, I still feel like something inside me fractured. This might sound like a small thing, but if you've ever been accused of something you didn't do, something you wouldn't even dream of doing, you'll understand why I'm still haunted by it. Why I still avoid eye contact with her. Why I stopped sitting near her at lunch. Why I've become wary of any moment that might involve touch or closeness, even in the most innocent context. I keep replaying that moment over and over, her face turning red as she choked, my heart hammering as I stood behind her, the panic thought, if I don't do something right now, she could die. I didn't think about protocol or perception. I thought about saving her. That was it. And yet, somehow, that moment, those few seconds, became the reason I was called into HR, told to explain myself, and reminded that in any situation, even an emergency, there could be consequences I never imagined. So I'm here, telling my story, because part of me still wonders, was I the asshole for how I handled it afterward? Was I wrong for deciding I had to protect myself from her, even if it meant changing the way I treated someone I once considered a friend? Or is this just the price of trying to do the right thing in a world where even the purest intentions can be twisted into something else? I've worked in this company for almost 6 years now. It's a medium-sized office, big enough that you don't know everyone intimately, but small enough that you recognize most faces and exchange polite greetings when you pass in the hall. We have the usual assortment of personalities. The loud talkers who never seem to work, the quiet overachievers, the gossip mills, and the people like me, who try to stay neutral, keep their heads down, and do their jobs well. My role isn't glamorous. I work in operations, mostly handling scheduling, logistics, and the occasional emergency that comes up when plans inevitably fall apart. It's the kind of work that requires patience and calm, which I've always prided myself on having. My coworkers would probably describe me as steady, reliable, maybe a little reserved. That's how I like it. I don't go out of my way to be the life of the party, but I try to be approachable. I bring donuts on Fridays sometimes. I remember people's birthdays. I thought that, over time, I'd earned a certain degree of trust and goodwill. And for the most part, it seemed like I had. That's why it was so shocking when everything went sideways. The woman at the center of this story, I'll call her L. was one of the people I'd felt most comfortable around. She's in her late 20s, a few years younger than me, but we'd always had a friendly rapport. When she first joined the company, she was shy, almost anxious, but over the years she'd become more relaxed with our little group. We often ate lunch together with the same small circle, maybe 6 or 7 people. We'd talk about everything from work frustrations to random things we'd seen online. Elle was funny in a dry, understated way. She had a sharp sense of humor that took time to reveal itself, and I respected her for it. I never had any inkling that she was carrying but I wish she had told me or any of us, so we could have been more mindful. Our office culture is relatively casual, though professional. People hug sometimes when someone's going through a hard time. They high-five over a good result. No one behaves inappropriately. We all understood where the boundaries were, or at least I thought we did. The cafeteria itself isn't fancy. Just a long, bright room with laminate tables, big windows looking out on the parking lot, and that persistent hum of the vending machine in the corner. I remember the way the sun was slanting through the blinds on the day it all happened, lighting up the dust in the air. It was just an ordinary Wednesday. We were eating leftover pizza from a team celebration. Someone had brought chips and salsa. A few people were making jokes about how terrible our coffee is. Nothing about it felt remarkable until the moment Elle started coughing. It happened so fast I can't even be sure who noticed first. 1 second she was laughing. The next she had this look of pure panic in her eyes. Her face went red, then purple. She tried to stand, but her chair scraped loudly across the floor, and she doubled over instead. I remember thinking, she's choking. Someone gasped. Another coworker stood up and just froze. For a fraction of a second, nobody moved. And then I was out of my chair, moving around the table. It wasn't heroic, it was automatic. I'd done the basic first aid course, and even though I'd never needed to use it before, some part of my brain switched into autopilot. I didn't ask permission. There wasn't time. I wrapped my arms around her from behind, placed one fist just above her navel, and started doing abdominal thrusts. It was messy. She was panicking, flailing a little, and I had to reposition my arms twice before I got the motion right. When the blockage finally came free, she made this awful gasping sound, then bent over the table, coughing and crying. Everyone exhaled in relief. Someone clapped me on the shoulder. Another coworker murmured, "Jesus, man, you saved her life." I was shaking too. My heart was hammering so loud I could hear it in my ears. I bent down and asked her softly, "Are you okay?" She nodded, but she didn't look at me. Her face was blotchy red, streaked with tears. After a second, she straightened up, turned, and walked quickly out of the cafeteria toward the bathrooms. I figured she was embarrassed. Who wouldn't be? We all stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Then, like people do, everyone tried to pretend things were normal again. Someone made a joke about how we'd better be nicer to me since I knew how to tackle people. A few nervous laughs. The conversation slowly picked up. I sat back down, still trembling, but relieved. If you told me in that moment that what I'd done, what felt like the only thing I could do, would be turned into something questionable, something suspect, I would have thought you were insane. But that's exactly what happened. The rest of that afternoon passed like any other. I went back to my desk, answered emails, and tried to focus. Occasionally, my mind replayed the moment over and over, her face turning purple, the panicked confusion in the room, the way her body felt so fragile in my arms when I was trying to help her. I didn't see her again that day. I figured she'd gone home early out of embarrassment or exhaustion. Part of me thought about sending a message, "Hope you're okay," but I didn't want to make it worse by reminding her, so I stayed silent. The next day, she was back at her desk. When I walked by on my way to refill my coffee, she didn't look up. It wasn't overt hostility. It was more like she was pretending I wasn't there. I told myself that was normal. If I'd just been the center of attention like that, I'd probably be mortified too. So I gave her space. By Friday morning, I'd mostly convinced myself the incident was behind us. That's why, when I opened my inbox and saw an email from HR with the subject line, "Request for meeting," I felt a jolt of confusion more than dread. Still, there was something about the wording, so terse, so official, that made my stomach twist. When I arrived at the HR office at 11 o'clock sharp, the manager was already sitting behind her desk, a manila folder laid neatly in front of her. She gestured for me to sit. "Thank you for coming in," she began. Her voice was gentle but deliberate, like she was trying to cushion a blow. "I want to let you know this conversation is confidential." I nodded, feeling a prickling behind my ears. "There has been a complaint filed regarding the incident that occurred on Wednesday in the cafeteria," she continued.
Blinkt's her.
"The incident? The Heimlich maneuver you performed." I swallowed, my throat dry. I thought that was resolved. She was choking. I did what I was trained to do. I understand, she said evenly. And to be clear, this is not a disciplinary action. But the colleague involved reported that she experienced the contact as invasive and inappropriate. I could feel my pulse thudding in my temples. I'm sorry, but what does that mean? I was trying to save her life. She described feeling your body pressed against hers in a way that made her extremely uncomfortable. The HR manager said, her tone carefully neutral. Specifically, she said she felt your groin area pressing into her back, and that after the fact, she felt violated. I felt a roaring in my ears. My mouth opened but no words came out. She stated that she understands you were assisting her. The HR manager continued. But she also feels that the contact was more than what was strictly necessary. She has requested that the matter be formally documented. I shook my head slowly. There was no time to think about anything except getting the food out. We are not accusing you of intentional misconduct, she interrupted calmly. But we are obligated to take all complaints seriously. During this process, you'll be on modified duty. You are not to interact directly with the complainant unless necessary for work. It was as if the floor had disappeared under me. I'd never had a complaint in my personnel file. I'd never been reprimanded. My entire record was clean. And now, suddenly, my name was going to be associated with this. May I submit a statement? I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Of course. You may write your account of what happened. We will also be collecting statements from other witnesses. I sat there for another half hour, answering questions about the sequence of events, my training, whether I had any prior conflict with her, I didn't. Whether I'd ever behaved in a way that could be construed as inappropriate, I hadn't. When I finally left the HR office, my legs felt unsteady. I walked back to my desk in a daze. All around me, people were tapping at their keyboards, chatting about weekend plans, oblivious to the fact that my whole world had tilted sideways. I tried to keep working, but my mind was in a loop. I saved her. I didn't do anything wrong. And yet, there was this poisonous seed of doubt. What if someone believed I had? What if no amount of explaining would be enough? That weekend was unbearable. I barely slept. I thought about my parents. How proud they were that I'd built a stable career, that I was known as a good guy. What would they say if they knew I was under investigation for something like this? By Monday, I'd rehearsed every possible defense in my head. But when HR called me back in, they said that after reviewing witness statements and security footage, they determined there was no evidence of intentional misconduct. I was cleared, but the word felt hollow, because nothing felt cleared at all. When I walked back to my desk, Elle was there, eyes down, typing. She didn't look up. In the days that followed, she avoided me, and I avoided her. The rest of the team sensed something was off. A few people asked if I was okay. I just mumbled that there had been a misunderstanding. But inside I felt raw, humiliated, angry, and worst of all, afraid. I had acted instinctively the way any decent person would. But apparently that didn't protect me. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this could happen again, at any time with anyone, and my entire life could be upended by someone's perception of an action I never meant to be anything but helpful. Even after HR closed the case and officially said I was cleared, the sense of violation didn't go away. It was like a splinter lodged under my skin, small but impossible to ignore. On paper, everything was back to normal. I was allowed to resume my regular duties. I was told there would be no notation in my file beyond a record of the investigation. But no one could erase the memory of sitting in that small, neutral-colored room, being asked to explain in detail how my body was positioned during an emergency. I replayed it over and over in my mind. Not just the choking itself, but the feeling that came afterward. The suspicion, the implication that maybe, just maybe, I had taken advantage of her vulnerability. And that's what hurt the most. I would never have dreamed of exploiting someone. The thought disgusted me. But I couldn't shake the fear that this was how she would always see me now. A threat, a potential predator. At first, I tried to be understanding. I told myself she has trauma. She panicked. She didn't mean to hurt you. But the more I thought about it, the more the anger started to creep in around the edges of my sympathy. She could have talked to me. She could have pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I know you were trying to help, but that was hard for me." Instead, she filed a formal complaint. She set in motion a process that almost destroyed my sense of safety at work. The day after I was reinstated, she stopped by my desk. I'd been bracing for it, but when I actually saw her standing there, shoulders hunched, hands twisting nervously, I felt my chest tighten. "Can I talk to you?" she asked quietly. I nodded but didn't invite her to sit. She didn't meet my eyes. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to escalate. Panicked. I didn't know how to process it. I studied her face. She looked exhausted, ashamed. I knew she wasn't lying about her distress, but that didn't make it okay. "I accept your apology," I said finally. My voice sounded flat to my own ears. "But I hope you understand why I need to keep things strictly professional from now on." Her eyes flicked up to mine, wide and wounded. "You don't have to. It was a misunderstanding. We've worked together for years." "That's true," I said. "But this has made me realize that I can't assume I know how someone else will interpret my actions. So for my own protection, I think it's best if we keep our distance." She looked like she might cry. "You're being ridiculous." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm also being careful." After that conversation, something shifted in me. I stopped trying to pretend we could ever go back to the way things were. When we were in meetings together, I sat at the opposite end of the table. When we passed in the hall, I nodded politely but didn't stop to chat. If she joined a group for lunch, I quietly found another table. I stopped inviting her to after-work drinks or casual group activities. It wasn't out of spite. It was self-preservation, because I'd learned something I couldn't unlearn. It only takes one moment, one complaint, for everything you've built to come crashing down. And no matter how innocent your intentions, no matter how many witnesses confirm your story, the suspicion never fully disappears. I started thinking about other situations where something similar could happen. A hand on someone's shoulder when they're upset. A high five that lingers a second too long. A hug to celebrate good news. I realized I no longer trusted anyone enough to risk it, so I made my decision. From then on, I would keep my distance. Not just from her, but from any situation where touch or closeness could be misread. Some people might say that's paranoid. I call it protecting myself. It didn't take long for people to notice that something had changed between us. The first few days after I returned to my normal duties, I tried to keep my head down. I didn't want to feed the rumor mill. But in an office like ours, where people spend more time together than with their own families, silences are as loud as shouting. At first, my coworkers tiptoed around it. They probably assumed it was just awkwardness after what had happened in the cafeteria. But by the second week, people started making little comments. "Hey, are you and Elle okay?" Someone asked in the break room, trying to sound casual. I shrugged. "We had a misunderstanding. We're keeping things professional." They accepted that explanation without pressing, most did anyway. But I could feel the curiosity simmering under the surface. I knew how office gossip worked. Someone always had an opinion, and it rarely stayed private. A few people, especially those who had been in the cafeteria that day, were openly supportive. One colleague, a woman I'd worked with for years, took me aside. "For what it's worth," she said, her voice low, "I don't think you did anything wrong. You acted faster than any of us. If you hadn't," she could have choked. I nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude, but others weren't as sympathetic. There were little moments. Glances exchanged when I walked into a room, conversations that stopped abruptly. I'd hear my name in a hushed voice, followed by the soft click of a door closing. One afternoon, I caught two people whispering by the printer. I heard enough to know they were debating whether I had crossed the line. "It just seems weird, you know?" One of them murmured. "Like, why did he have to get so close?" "Because she was choking," the other replied, sounding exasperated. "Would you rather he let her pass out?" "I'm just saying it's complicated. That word, complicated, echoed in my head. It wasn't complicated to me. It was terrifying and humiliating, but never complicated. She was dying. I acted. Full stop. But perception, I was learning, is everything. Even the people who supported me seemed uneasy. It was as if my presence was now a reminder that the safe, predictable routines of the office could be shattered by something no one wanted to think about. The hardest part was seeing how she reacted. Elle kept trying to mend things in her own way. She would give me small, tentative smiles when we passed each other. Once, she left a coffee on my desk with a sticky note that said, "Peace offering?" I didn't touch it. I didn't know how to respond. Eventually, she cornered me again near the elevators. "Can we please just talk?" she asked, her voice strained. "I feel like you hate me." "I don't hate you," I said quietly. "I just can't go back to how things were." Her eyes filled with tears. "You're being petty." I shook my head. "I'm being careful. I told you I was sorry. I was scared. I didn't know what else to do." "I understand that," I said. And I did, on some level. But I also knew I couldn't pretend nothing had happened. After that conversation, she stopped trying to reach out. But the air between us remained charged, heavy with things unsaid. A few colleagues started taking sides, not openly but in subtle ways. The people who believed me treated me the same as always. The people who felt uncomfortable drifted away. I lost one of my closest work friends after he told me, hesitantly, "You know, man, you could have handled it more sensitively afterward." "What was I supposed to do?" I asked. "Act like everything was fine?" He didn't have an answer. Even my manager eventually called me in. "Look," he said, "I'm not here to judge, but this tension is affecting the team dynamic. Is there any way you two can move past it?" I almost laughed. Move past it. As if this was some petty squabble over who stole whose lunch from the fridge. "I'm not interested in fighting with her," I said. "But I have to protect myself." He nodded, though he didn't look convinced. I knew what he was thinking, that I was overreacting, that by maintaining distance, I was prolonging the discomfort for everyone. But from where I stood, the risk was too high. I'd already seen how quickly an innocent act could turn into an accusation. I wasn't going to give anyone an opportunity to misunderstand me again. In the end, the office settled into an uneasy truce. Elle and I worked on the same projects, but we communicated through email or in meetings, never one-on-one. We were polite, professional, and nothing more. Some people whispered that I was being cold. Others said I was right to set boundaries. And in the quiet moments, walking to my car in the dark after everyone else had left, I would wonder which of them was right. Because even now, after everything, part of me still feels guilty. And another part of me feels like I didn't have any other choice. So here I am, months later, still turning this over in my head, still wondering if I handled it the only way I could, or if I let my fear and resentment get the better of me. Sometimes, when I catch sight of Elle, across the office, hunched over her desk or chatting with other coworkers, I feel this pang of regret. I never wanted things to end up like this. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have said she was one of the people I felt closest to at work. We weren't best friends, but we had an easy camaraderie, a sense of trust. And then, in the span of a few days, it was all gone. I think about that moment all the time, the instant she started choking, the adrenaline in my chest, the thought, if I don't move, she could die right here. I didn't think about how it looked. I didn't think about whether my body was too close. I didn't even think about her past or her trauma, because in that second, the only thing that mattered was that she couldn't breathe. I keep wondering what other people would have done. Should I have hesitated? Should I have asked if someone else wanted to help her instead? Should I have waited an extra beat to see if she could dislodge the blockage on her own? I know the answer is no, but the doubts still creep in when I least expect them. I've read so many stories online about people, especially women, whose experiences weren't believed, whose pain was dismissed. And I don't want to be the guy who says, she overreacted, or she made it up. I believe that she felt what she felt. I don't doubt that when she realized my body was pressed against hers, it triggered something that terrified her. I'm not angry at her for having trauma. I'm angry that she chose to handle it by filing a complaint first instead of coming to me privately. I'm angry that the process was set up in a way that treated me like a suspect before it treated me like a human being. I'm angry that even now, even after being cleared, there's a part of me that feels permanently marked by this. That's why I decided to distance myself. Not to punish her, but because I knew I couldn't trust that it wouldn't happen again. I stopped inviting her to lunch. I stopped making friendly small talk. I stopped standing too close. She told me I was being petty. My manager implied I was prolonging the discomfort. A few coworkers said I should just let it go. That holding on to it was making everyone uneasy. But to me, it wasn't about holding a grudge. It was about protecting myself from the possibility of another complaint, another week of investigation, another round of whispered conversations behind closed doors. I tried explaining this to Elle once more before I finally gave up. I told her, I don't hate you, but I can't go back to how things were. I have to be sure nothing like this ever happens again. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she didn't. Sometimes I think maybe I should have made more effort to understand, to reassure her, to show that I believed her fear was real. Maybe then she wouldn't feel like I'd turned cold. But other times, I think about sitting in that HR office, sweating through my shirt while someone read her statement out loud to me. I remember the humiliation, the fear, the sense of everything I'd worked for hanging by a thread. And I know I can't pretend that didn't change me. So here's where I'm stuck. Am I the asshole for refusing to pretend everything is fine? Am I the asshole for not wanting to be close to someone who accused me of something that could have ruined my life? Or am I the asshole for not trying harder to see it through her eyes, to see that maybe, to her, this wasn't just about a choking incident, but about every time she's felt powerless or afraid? I don't know anymore. So Reddit. AITA for keeping my distance from my coworker after she filed a complaint about me touching her while I was trying to save her life?